the Dallas Cowboys' secret weapon in 2026, and the NFL doesn't want you to know about it. To let me tell you something the NFL schedulers are desperately trying to convince you isn't real. The Cowboys didn't just get a good schedule this year, they got what might be one of the most strategically favorable rest setups in the entire league. And when you look at the cold, hard numbers, the data doesn't lie, even if the league office wants to pretend otherwise. If you are a Cowboys fan and you have been starving for something, anything, to be genuinely excited about heading into 2026, buckle up. Because this right here, this might actually be the quiet advantage that nobody is talking about loudly enough. And before we get deep into all of this, if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because we break down Cowboys content like this every single day and you do not want to miss what's coming this season. Now let's talk about something called rest differential, or rest advantage. Whatever label you want to slap on it, the concept is simple but the implications are enormous. In the NFL, not every team plays on the same day every single week. Some teams come off a bye week with 10, 11, 12 days of recovery. Others get crushed on a short week, playing Thursday night football just 4 days after a brutal Sunday battle. When you track those gaps, when you actually measure which teams go into games fresher versus which teams show up bruised, exhausted, and mentally drained, a pattern emerges. And that pattern matters more than the league wants to admit. One analyst in particular has spent years documenting exactly this kind of data, tracking rest advantages and disadvantages across the entire NFL schedule year after year. And for the 2026 season, when you rank every team in the league by rest advantage, the Dallas Cowboys come in at number 3. Third in the entire NFL. Only the Chicago Bears and the Buffalo Bills rank ahead of them. The Washington Commanders sit just behind at number 4. Meanwhile, teams like the Los Angeles Chargers are buried so far down that list it's almost laughable. While Dallas is resting up and recovering, other teams are grinding themselves into the ground on short weeks. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, where it gets a little bit controversial. The NFL's own scheduling department, specifically the executive in charge of putting together the league calendar, has gone on record saying, and I want you to really hear this, that rest disparity is, quote, not a thing. That having extra days of rest before a game provides, in their words, no competitive advantage whatsoever. Not coming off a bye. Not with 1 extra day. Not with 2 extra days. Not with 3. Nothing. 0. Doesn't matter. Now I don't know about you, but when I heard that, I had to pause and genuinely ask myself, do they actually believe that? Or is this the NFL protecting the integrity of a schedule that, whether they admit it or not, is nearly impossible to make perfectly fair for 32 teams across 18 weeks? Because here is what the data actually says. Since 2015, and this is a massive sample size, over a decade of NFL football, teams coming off a bye week win their very next game 56. 1% of the time. Not half the time. Not a coin flip. 56.1%. And when you look at even a single game rest advantage, just 1 extra day of recovery compared to the opponent, teams win 54% of the time. Flip it around, and teams playing at a rest disadvantage win only 46% of the time. Think about what that gap actually means at the NFL level. We are talking about the most competitive professional sports league on the planet, where the margin between winning and losing is razor thin every single Sunday. Organizations spend millions of dollars every offseason trying to find that 0.5% edge. In the draft room, in free agency, in the weight room, in the film room. And here you have a built-in scheduling factor that statistically swings outcomes by 4 to 6%, and the league is out here telling you it doesn't exist. That is either willful ignorance or something far more deliberate. And I'll let you decide which one it is. Question of the day, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments below. Do you believe the NFL intentionally designed schedules that favor certain markets and certain teams? Or is it truly random chaos and the rest advantages are just a coincidence? Now let's zoom in specifically on the Cowboys, because their historical numbers with rest advantage are even more striking than the league-wide average. Since 2015, when Dallas has had an extra rest advantage heading into a game, they have won 67% of the time. 67%. Compare that to their performance when they face a rest disadvantage, and they drop all the way down to winning just 41. 9% of those games. That is a 25 percentage point swing depending on how rested the team is going into a football game. You cannot look at that number and tell me rest doesn't matter. You just cannot. And before someone jumps in and says, well, the Cowboys win a lot of games anyway. Yes, they're a competitive franchise. That's true. But the gap between their rest advantage record and their rest disadvantage record is not a small statistical noise issue. That is a documented, repeatable trend over more than a decade of football. When Dallas is fresh, Dallas is dangerous. When Dallas is dragging, Dallas struggles. And in 2026, the schedule has been constructed in a way that gives them more of the former and far less of the latter. Here's the specific breakdown of how this plays out across the Cowboys' 2026 schedule. The only game where Dallas will actually carry a rest disadvantage is in Week 8, when they host the Arizona Cardinals. And here's the silver lining even within that negative. It's a home game. So even their one rest disadvantage spot on the calendar comes with the benefit of playing in front of their own crowd. That's about as manageable as a rest disadvantage gets. Now flip it around and look at where the Cowboys get to be the fresher team. Week 6 is a perfect example. Dallas heads to Green Bay for what figures to be a massive primetime matchup, and they arrive there with a +3 rest advantage. Why? Because the stretch leading up to that game is genuinely brutal. The Cowboys travel internationally to Brazil for a road game against Houston, then host Tampa Bay on a Thursday night, one of the most body-crushing scheduling combinations you can put a team through. But coming out the other side of that grind, they get a reprieve. Extra days before they meet the Packers, and they show up at Lambeau with legs under them while Green Bay may not have the same luxury. Then there's Week 13. Dallas travels to Seattle on Monday Night Football, and they're doing so with extra rest built in off the back of the Thanksgiving game. The Cowboys have been playing that Thursday holiday slot for years, almost like clockwork. And this year, that Thanksgiving game actually works in their favor for the week that follows, giving them more time than a typical Sunday to Monday turnaround would allow. And perhaps the biggest rest advantage on the entire schedule comes in Week 15, when Dallas hosts the Los Angeles Rams. At that point in the season, the Rams are coming in off their own bye week, which you might think gives LA an advantage. But the Cowboys are sitting at +6 in rest differential for that game.
+6.
That is an enormous edge when you're deep into a December schedule and bodies are starting to break down around the league. Week 17 rounds it out with Dallas getting an extra day against the New York Giants, who will be dragging in off a Monday Night Football game of their own. Now step back and look at the full picture. 3 teams in the entire NFL have 1 or fewer rest disadvantage games this season. Those 3 teams are the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee largely avoids the issue because they're barely featured in primetime at all. But Dallas has 7 primetime or standalone appearances this season, tied for second most in the entire league, and they're still managing to keep rest disadvantages almost completely off their schedule. That combination is genuinely rare. And speaking of primetime, let's talk about the Cowboys' 2026 national exposure because it's significant. Week 1 opens on Sunday Night Football against the Giants. Then there's a stretch, and this is wild, 3 consecutive primetime games. Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and Monday Night Football back-to-back against the Buccaneers, the Packers, and the Eagles. That kind of run would destroy most teams. But sandwiched around the bye, with the rest advantages the schedule provides, it becomes survivable. It becomes an opportunity rather than a sentence. After those 2 weeks off between primetime runs, Thanksgiving brings the Eagles for a standalone window. Week 13 is Monday Night Football in Seattle. And Week 16 closes out the primetime slate with Jacksonville on Sunday Night Football. Unless this Cowboys team completely falls apart and stops being must-see television, those slots aren't going anywhere. But here's what I want you to really sit with. What makes the back end of this schedule genuinely exciting is where that bye week falls. The Cowboys get their rest late in the season, and while some fans might groan about that, wanting the bye earlier to fix early season stumbles, a late bye is actually a weapon if you've survived the first half healthy and competitive. Coming out of the bye in Week 14 or 15, Dallas faces the Rams, with that +6 rest advantage, followed by the Jaguars in prime time, which should be a winnable game. Then the Giants in Week 17 and the Commanders in Week 18 to close the regular season. If the Cowboys have done enough work in the first 12 weeks to still be in the playoff conversation, and that is the critical if, that back half of the schedule is genuinely set up for a run. A real one. The kind of finish that gives a fan base momentum heading into January. Now, one of the most fascinating footnotes in this entire conversation is what's happening on the other side of the NFC East. While Dallas, the Commanders, and the rest of the division are largely avoiding games against opponents coming off bye weeks, the Philadelphia Eagles face four teams coming off their bye in 2026. The Eagles are essentially walking into multiple situations this season where an opponent arrives at peak freshness, full preparation time, and a week of targeted game planning specifically for Philadelphia. That is not a small thing. That is a compounding burden that, in a division race that could come down to 1 or 2 games, might matter enormously. Think about what it actually means to face a team that just had 12 or 13 days to prepare exclusively for you. Their defensive coordinator has had an entire extra week to find your tendencies. Their banged-up linebacker who was limping on Sunday is now fully healthy. Their practice representatives are sharp and precise. And you walked in off a short week with jet lag and a third-string cornerback taped together with medical wraps. Does that decide games by itself? No. But across 4 instances in a single season. That is a serious, structural disadvantage for the Eagles that nobody in their fan base seems to be panicking about enough. And that is why the Cowboys' position in all of this feels like it could genuinely matter in the NFC East race. Here's the bottom line. Rest advantage isn't magic. It isn't a guarantee. The Cowboys still have to execute. They still have to win the games. They still need the quarterback to be sharp, the defensive line to dominate, and the coaching staff to put together a complete product week after week. Nobody is handing them anything. But football at the NFL level is decided by margins, by percentages, by whether your running back has 80% of his legs under him or 100%, by whether your pass rusher is explosive off the line or half a step slow from fatigue. And in 2026, the Dallas Cowboys have been handed one of the most favorable rest setups in the entire league, backed by over a decade of data proving that this stuff is real, no matter what the NFL scheduling office wants to tell the public. The question isn't whether rest advantage is a factor. The numbers have answered that definitively. The real question, and drop your answer in the comments right now, is this: what do you think the Cowboys' final record is in 2026? Give me your prediction. Are they playoff bound, or are we setting ourselves up for another heartbreak? Because if this team can stay healthy, take care of business in the early weeks, and ride that back half schedule all the way into December with momentum, there is a legitimate path here. A path to a good December. A path to a good January. And maybe, just maybe, a path to something this fanbase has been waiting on for far too long.